All right, I will call to order the December meeting of the Glendale Planning and Historic Preservation Commission. We note that we have a quorum of 5 members, enough to conduct business. We will begin, as always, by reviewing the minutes of our last meeting. Members of the commission, you've had a chance to review those. What is your pleasure?
I move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Is there a second?
I wasn't there, so I don't think I can.
I wasn't there either, but
Leslie?
people down there, could you second the motion?
Am I allowed to second?
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion second. Further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, well, the first item on the agenda is a public hearing for zoning code amendments to Chapter 154 regarding the historic guidelines. David, that's your bailiwick. Please tell us
Yes.
what you got.
I've given the crowd here this evening, I don't know how many folks are here. I can tell how many folks are here for applications. I don't know if we want to maybe flip-flop and
Yeah, we
let
can.
the applications go through and then,
Yeah, let's do that. All right, let's move on to new business, beginning with the list on our agenda. It's 325 East Sharon, Megan Holtz for a new driveway. Good evening, Ms. Holtz.
So, go ahead.
No, we've all reviewed your application. We've seen what you're proposing. You can tell us what you want, or as little as much, and we'll take it from there.
Right now, it's the rear entry of the alley, so there's the alley, and I guess the woman before just parked in the grass, I'm not really sure. But we'd like to put in a driveway back there for access, for off-street parking.
And there is a garage there already?
No, there's a shed.
A shed. I know I saw it, I just don't remember the details.
Is there a plan for to build a garage in the future?
No. Or we'll be selling the property, I mean, unless somebody else wants to build a garage. And I have the drawing here, do you want to see it like
It's just a concrete
a real
pad.
life? Yeah, it's actually, it'll be asphalt, so.
Is it asphalt?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is a pad, I guess, big enough to park four cars.
3 cars are crossed, and then it'll be 45 feet deep, which will almost reach the shed, so.
Anybody want to see the drawings that she's brought? Anybody have a motion?
My lovely drawing.
I
Got it
move
on my phone,
approval.
so it's not much better.
I'll second.
Motion second. Anyone in the audience wish to address this application? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Don't go far.
Should I sit down and pretend?
No. Next is a 1092 Laurel for an accessory structure by Megan Holtz.
Yes, and I have the big drawings if you want those, since you guys don't have a screen.
Yeah, why don't
You
you
wanna see
lay them
those?
out here, and I'll pass them around if we can. Do you all need to see them? Do you have multiple copies?
You can start since you're the chairman.
Sorry, on the big drawing.
Well, tell us what you can about
I mean, I
this.
have a little tiny drawing if you want to see that, but I don't know how much you can see of it.
Wouldn't hurt if you wanted to street.
Yeah, it's good looking.
Yeah, that brick on the bottom.
Yeah.
I had a question. Is that masonry veneer intended to mimic, is your house got brick on it? Is it going to mimic that?
Yeah, and then we'll paint it to match the house.
Nice design.
And then the siding will match our existing siding also.
Oh, okay.
And could you tell us about the windows, please?
They'll match our existing windows.
Which are,
Simulated divided light, I mean, they've been approved before.
they're wood, they're aluminum
No, they're
clad wood,
vinyl.
they're vinyl?
They're vinyl.
On the side view, where the rear view, you show fiber cement shake siding. You detailed it on the front elevation drawing. Did they just not draw it on the side?
No, they just didn't draw it. It'll all match, though.
But it'll be like on the front?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's beautiful.
David, the zoning
Appropriate. Let's
is,
put it that.
it matches zoning, David, the sort of square footage and height and setbacks?
it does, and actually, not to try to pump up the applicant, but the drawing had a very handy little calculation confirming all of the requirements under our zoning code
Yeah.
that I'll be holding on to and referring for other applicants that
Yeah, he did his homework.
confirmed all those calculations. So,
So the guidelines say not to use vinyl windows. So are these vinyl-clad wood windows or just 100% vinyl
They're
windows?
vinyl, and that's what we have on our house that was previously approved from you.
And it was approved after 1993?
Yes. You can have vinyl window, I mean, it's my understanding you can have vinyl windows in the village.
Well, the guidelines say not to, but the guidelines aren't the same as the requirements.
Discourage it, certainly.
Our house was built in 1955, so it didn't have historic windows to begin with.
Well, the period of significance in the district goes up to 1960, but that may have been amended after your application.
And I don't know if it's even worth mentioning, but this little transition triangle that's out there on the, not 5 feet off the property line, that's fine. I mean, you've got to get there.
You can't
From
have it
here.
jog over like that.
And in
Yeah.
fact, in our new ribbon driveway ordinance, we talk about, it even talks about transitioning as soon as you can from existing noncompliance back to the 5-foot setback of a garage if you have a driveway, ribbon driveway close to the property line, so I think that covers it.
All right, any further comments by the commission? Anyone in the audience wish to address this application?
Well, the only thing I would just say in general, if we're going to use room like this, it would be, if the intention is to give the audience an opportunity to see what you've got and to talk about it. I'm not picking on that, I'm saying in general, it would be nice to be able to see.
Show it to them.
Yeah. Well, downstairs we have the TV, but up here,
And it's online before the,
we don't circulate, no, not publicly. Applicant? Yes.
well, then never mind, excuse me.
So the video isn't going to show the plans, right?
correct.
Just for us.
And I'm not picking on you, we just
I just assumed it'd be out there for the public to see, Another reason.
All right, any other comments? Members of the commission, do we have a
So-
motion?
So the application has two parts, right? The accessory structure and the driveway?
No, these are two different locations.
Yeah, we've already done
No,
the
They
driveway.
already did the driveway.
Correct, but on Laurel Avenue, there's a pavement in front of the new garage, right?
Oh,
The
the
extension
pad.
of the
Well, we'll have-
driveway?
The
Yeah, we'll
pad,
have to
yeah, yeah.
extend our driveway in
Yeah.
order to make
So,
it to the garage.
excuse me if I write on your agenda.
I share.
Okay, so I will move approval of the application for an accessory structure and extension of the driveway. And include approval of vinyl windows only on the basis that they match the existing windows in the house.
Do you want to specify also that the siding will match, the front siding is designated on the plans? I mean, she mentioned that, but it might not hurt to have, make it a
I
condition.
Approved as submitted. I
Well, as submitted, it didn't show the details of the siding.
didn't? Okay.
There was a
And that
note.
the siding will
Yeah,
match,
it should-
okay,
That-
okay, on the condition that the windows and the siding will match the existing house.
All right.
the drawing.
There a
I'll
second?
second the motion.
Motion second. Any further discussion? You understand the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Holtz. All right, moving on to 420 East Sharon Grove Architects for a porch addition. I'm not checking my emails. I have the drawings on my phone.
Yeah, this is a little challenging without having the drawings. I didn't
You
even
have
bring
the
the
drawings
drawings.
here?
I have like a very old one I could walk around if you'd like, but I'm Julie Phelan, Grove Architects. This is for a house that you have approved multiple projects for. This is a porch addition on the side, on
like
the
that
east
online.
side now.
Looks good.
It will have a flat roof. It will have, it should align with the, it should really, it was designed to kind of match the existing front porch, so the gutter will align. The massing should go with that. I don't have much else to say. Does anyone have any questions?
Looks good. Looks appropriate.
Okay, great, thank you.
What is the material you're going to use
For the
for the porch?
the decking, probably like composite, and painted composite. Their existing porch is painted composite white right now.
All right.
So like the existing front porch, this is gonna be the side porch.
So simulate wood then?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other questions, members of the commission? Anyone in the audience wish to address this? Is there a motion?
I missed a couple of meetings, so I guess I get to make all the motions
Yeah, we're both
tonight. I
in
move
today, so-
approval as submitted.
I'd second the motion.
Motion second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, the last new business we have is somebody named Mike Bessel at 15 West Sharon, window replacement. All right.
I also did not bring any materials. I think everything was online, David. And it is a new window down at 9 through 15 West Sharon on the western side of the building. It's currently a metal window. For the last 10 years, we've tried to keep it weather tight, and finally the metal is rusted enough that we can no longer caulk and paint. So it's a Marvin window, all fiberglass, simulated divided light.
Yeah.
Similar color to what is there now. It's what their champagne color, so it's almost the same color as what's there now. And they're able to produce a kind of a custom window that is it resembles the existing exactly. Different from what's there now. Right now, it's like a casement window that pushes out. The two side panels push out, and for people out on the patio, it's something you can bang your head into. So we're installing what is a sliding window that can be functional for their use. And it won't push out, it's just a sliding window. But for all other purposes, it's almost an exact replica.
Will both side panels slide in?
Yes,
Okay.
both can slide in.
Okay.
Any other questions? And do you want in the audience wish to address this application?
Comment.
Sure.
Since Mr. Bessel is presenting his windows, we don't technically have a quorum to vote.
Well, it's always been my understanding that when a member can't vote for a conflict, that member still counts towards the quorum.
Okay.
And we've got 4 out of 7.
Good question.
It is a good
Yeah,
question,
No,
yes.
it's a good question.
it is.
It's a good question.
Okay, well, I move approval of the application that's submitted.
I'll second the motion.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Best. Tell you what, let me, before we get into other business, let me ask if there's anybody in the audience who wish to address the commission on any other matter. You know what, can you step to the people on the internet can't hear you?
All we're really looking for is reassurance that they'll be brought into compliance, because right now the work order's been pulled down and they're continuing work, and that's fine, but I don't see any evidence that this building is going to be moved to where it needs to be, and
Yeah, I'll have to rely on
We're
Mr.
staying,
Lumsden.
yeah, we're staying in contact with your neighbor to ensure that they bring that into compliance.
okay, because as it stands right now, my understanding is the measurement is from property line, 5-foot setback to the most protruding part of the building.
No.
It's
just
not?
foundation.
Just the so it's the eaves
We've
and
been
the
using-
foundation.
I was going to bring this up for clarification later, but if we go to yard regulations, 154.55C, it talks about 18-inch reference. And I'd like to bring that up to discuss clarifying that, because it talks about architectural,
Sure.
what do you call it?
Protrusion?
Decorative items that can protrude up to 18 inches from the wall of the building.
Into the setback?
Want to hear, it's hard to hear.
Oh, sorry. So anyway, that's the ordinance that controls, the 5 foot is to the foundation. The way we've done it over the years, we've looked at
Okay.
it this way, so.
Next question, presuming the building is moved to the new, let's say the new foundation, those couple feet or whatever of old foundation that have now been exposed where the building is now but won't be, are those going to be broken up?
It's my understanding, yes.
Okay. All right, that's really what we needed to know.
And just so we're clear, because the last time we talked, and we had a long discussion in the meeting, and we were left then, until just now, with the understanding that the building was going to be pushed over further, because the eaves, not the foundation, was going to be what was determining where 5 feet from the property line was.
So
Yeah,
So what are we supposed to?
regardless of the measurement of 18 inches or whether the eaves are included or not,
They're 2
the proposed revision or new location, compliant location for the structure was measured 7 feet from the foundation to the property line. So the plan originally called for 24-inch eaves, so that maintains a 5-foot setback to that eave. So there would be an additional for measuring to the foundation, and there would be an additional 2 feet of setback. So that was based on the site plan that they submitted when we corresponded with them back, it was in September, I believe, or maybe earlier than that, but either way, that they would have a 7-foot setback from that property line to the building foundation.
Okay.
All right, stay in touch with David.
Yep.
He's our administrator.
We're
He's responsible for the
we're not,
enforcement.
they're not closing out the project. They're not getting their final inspection, final complete, any of that until we remedy this zoning issue. So now, of course, as the weather gets colder, I can't say how much work they're going to be able to get done, but they are aware of the requirement to bring the building into compliance with our zoning code. So we're keeping on them. We're not letting it go.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to address the commission? All right, let's get back onto our agenda. Let's go to other business before we get to the public hearing. Simple one looks like the review of the calendar for next year. David, tell us what you've proposed. I noticed we don't have a meeting in July or April.
So I've circulated here, this is the calendar for 2026, and I've put the same question to council. As you can see in April, July, and September, which are blocked off in red on this calendar, the April 3rd date is a village holiday, that's Good Friday. July 3rd is a village holiday, and September 7th is a village holiday. I wanted to have an opportunity to confirm with members of the Planning Commission and Council the general availability or interest in scheduling those meetings, typically held on the first Monday of the month. But given that they are the Monday following pretty significant holidays in Easter and then the 4th of July, which fall within the weekend, if there was any thought on availability, there's really, I don't think there's an urgency to make a determination tonight, but wanted to bring it to everyone's attention, give them an opportunity maybe to look at calendars and come up with what their input or availability might be.
Well,
Given this-
traditionally, we follow the council's
Correct.
schedule. I can't think of a time where we've gone different from the council.
I wouldn't want to, but given that the meeting nights affect both groups, I did want to have both groups have an opportunity to
Will
review
the
this.
council
the
be
calendar.
actually voting on their schedule for next year
I don't believe
tonight?
they typically vote on it. The schedule is set based on the holidays, but given that this one followed Thanksgiving so closely, was interested in trying to determine if that was, a reasonable expectation. I don't know if the members that are absent tonight is an ending indication, one way or the other, on that one. But want to prevent that from happening in '26 if we can. So, you know, like I said, no final answer is required tonight, but if there's maybe a preference or schedules or anything, we'll take that in consideration. So just follow up with me and let me know.
Yeah, David, once the council, I should say, establishes their schedule, would you
Okay.
bring this back to this commission in January? And just tell us what our calendar is going to be? They're not going to make everybody happy with whatever date
Oh,
you
no.
choose.
Yeah,
so
of
just-
course. No,
My
absolutely.
suggestion is stick with the first Monday as much as you can.
Sounds good.
All right. Anything else on the calendar?
Nope, just that.
All right, let's move on to the other business, number 2, discussion of zoning code amendments requiring a certified survey site plan for certain applications. David, you have something you want to discuss about that?
I will defer to Mr. Kerr. This was
This was one of my items.
his item.
I'm not going to be here in January, I'll be on vacation. So I thought I'd bring up the January items now. One of them was, I wanted to start the discussion tonight, there's hardly anybody here, concerning a recommendation to council for an ordinance to require certified survey site plan for any applications which include buildings, fences, major landscaping improvements, driveways, sidewalks, or other hardscape improvements. And that's the way I'd word it in the ordinance. And what I'm thinking is, over the years, we've had, it just would cut down on a lot of confusion and a lot of, let's just call it unprofessional presentations by applicants that are hard to verify, assuming things off the internet and that sort of thing, and arguments between neighbors, because we discussed last week the onus on the person who's being offended next door to the person that was doing the offending by potentially putting a fence up on the neighbor's property. And so I don't think that's appropriate. I think the appropriate thing is whoever's proactively building something should have the responsibility to build it correctly. So my idea is that we would, as Planning Commission, write a recommendation like we do to council occasionally, that they update the ordinance to include that as a requirement to an application for the items that I read earlier, so.
Okay. Are you proposing that we begin the process of amending the zoning code, or this is just a part of our annual meeting where we always take that opportunity to discuss possible changes to the code?
Yeah, this is, I was going to bring it up for the changes to the code, but in January, I'd like us, like whoever's here, to vote on, by then, actually vote on a recommendation to council to either say yes, or just, if you vote and you say no, then it's done.
Okay. Well, that's an excellent point. That reminds me of my duty to remind this commission that January is our annual meeting, which is our statutory date by which we are supposed to bring up any further amendments to the zoning code and to the guidelines. So this is a good example of what our responsibilities for the annual meeting in January. The other items on the agenda, Tom, those aren't suggested changes to the code.
Let's just do the one at a time. So
Yeah.
is that it? Is there any other, does anybody have any other comments about this suggestion?
Why don't you leave that language with me or with Dave, better with David, so that we can put it on
He
our...
already has it on email.
Okay, leave it
And
with
you
me.
do too, actually.
Oh, I didn't read
And
it.
then I was going to give that to, I'll email Becky to,
I'll give it to Becky. I got an email.
we both have emails.
All right.
Okay.
Any further discussion on that second item under other business?
Well, is this standard practice in other local governments?
Sure.
It is, in my practice, it is for major developments, shopping mall or new store. You don't tend to see it for driveways, sidewalks, hardscape. Sometimes I would not even see it for new houses. In those cases, you would have at least an architect's drawing, maybe not a certified survey, but some pretty precise drawings.
Is there a significant cost involved?
I don't know. I've never hired a surveyor.
A survey which I was required to have to build my garage, it was like $200 in 1979.
I did some quick Googling today. A residential boundary survey is anywhere from $1,500 to $4,000, depending on the complexity of the property.
Well, you know, I mean, Cokes aren't a nickel anymore, and things just talk. And if we want to have a historic district that we are here to preserve, historic preservation, you know, we need to be careful, and we need to know that things are built correctly.
Yeah, it might be, I could see why you would want to require it for buildings, but for things like sidewalks or hardscape improvements or driveways or landscaping, maybe that's a bit costly.
Garages.
You know,
Yeah.
maybe a
Building.
substitute for that would be a requirement, or at least urging people before they make an application to meet with their mayors, establish, at least agree where the property boundary is, and then plan accordingly.
That, I mean, that's an option.
Yeah, yeah, it's a neighborly option. It gets people talking. Okay.
Well, is there a requirement that applicants have consulted with their neighbors? Because that would be another way of dealing with it.
I've never seen it a requirement.
I
I've seen it in codes
Don't
where
believe
it's.
that you-
it's
I don't believe you
urged.
can make that a requirement.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe you can make that a requirement.
That's another reason, if you have your property laid out, you know where your property is, you have the right to build anything that's allowable in the ordinance within your property, not on other people's property. And the setbacks, I mean, who measures the setbacks? How does the building inspector know where a fence is? You know, if they build it, did they build it on the line, within the line? I mean, without a measurable survey, you don't know that, so.
Well, it's a good point. Seeing as how we just had a problem with the garage, it's reasonable to raise the question.
David, you don't belong to any chat group or discussion group of other administrators in your position? In other words, could you just send out an email blast to that group and say, does anybody requiring your zoning surveys for X, Y, and Z?
Yes, yeah, we'd
Well,
do that as part of this.
Yeah, that sure beats going to every individual zoning code
Oh,
throughout
yeah.
Hamilton County. If you could at least make that effort.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
that was my item for January,
Okay.
one item.
You got more?
Oh, yeah. It's not on the agenda. Since we're talking about January items, you want to go to the second one?
Yes.
The aforementioned regulation under yard regulations, under 154.55C, this is where the historic discussion has always come up on accessory structures under yard regulations of the 18 inches reference, which we've used for garage overhangs, building accessory structure overhangs that are allowed to hang over, they're called decorative items, are allowed to go beyond the 5-foot setback from the property line. Again, it'd be nice if you had a survey to establish where the 5-foot setback was. But they're allowed to, decorative items to overhang that 5-foot setback or infringe upon it up to 18 inches. And that's where that code in our ordinances, if you go look at it, exists. So, and just so you're clear, on soffits or overhangs, eaves, if you look around the village, in any architecture, many houses are built with 0 overhangs on both the gable ends, and on the facade, you know, the hip side, and with gutters right there. Whereas many houses can have 12-inch ones. Historically, 18-inch seems to be the overhang that many of the old houses in the 20s and 30s, craftsman houses specifically, have. So anyway, that's where that regulation, and again, that's where historically, as we've had these discussions over time, we referred to the overhang, 18-inch overhang, so, that aren't counted against the 5-foot setback, so.
Are you suggesting we just take a look at it and refresh our memories?
Just look at it and confirm that, like the question, we had the confusion for the
Yeah.
the
Woodbine.
Woodbine people. because when that came up, we were in the midst of the discussion, and I hadn't seen it the week before, and I didn't have time to research it before the meeting, but I went back and researched it afterwards. And had we had that, I think I could have clarified it. In fact, I got a call from one of the people that were here asking me, and I referred to this, the way I'd understood it, the way we've interpreted it over the years.
Right.
5-foot setback plus 18-inch overhang.
Okay.
So
Yeah, it's been a while since I've looked at that, but I'll look at it, we'll look at it.
that's one, so the question for the commission is, take a look at it and see if we need to clarify, not just decorative overhangs, but actually say eaves, or to clarify that a little better. I think it's fine as it is, but it could be clarified.
Needs another look,
So
a closer
that's-
look. Okay,
That's the second item, and that's it for the January meeting.
okay. Thank you for that, Tom. Anyone else have anything that they want for us to consider in January by way of the annual meeting? Zoning code changes, guideline changes? That kind of dovetails into what we're talking about later for our public hearing. But let's stay on the other business list. 15 South Lake, earth and berm. Is there a status update on that project?
The project is still in progress. Have not communicated with the property owners as of yet on the status of that. Most of the month of November for me, what wasn't spent, unfortunately, dealing with some illness at home, was spent on budget for ‑26. So the plan is to get to that in December and make sure that they're aware of that requirement prior to them resuming in the spring.
Okay. As a building on that, just so everybody recalls, their application came before us on January 15th of 2025, where the pool was approved with the condition of a 5-foot earthen berm would be installed for privacy on the west side of the pool. And the person even said it could settle from 5 foot down to 3 foot, and they'd be putting greens. But anyway, that was a condition of the approval. And that was an alternative to us, as a discussion, I brought up the discussion of requiring a privacy fence. And then, if you recall the discussion, then the berm was discussed as an alternative to a privacy fence, but they didn't build it, so.
And the thought was they'd use the spoils from the pool
Well,
excavation.
the dirt was sitting there for a long time, and then they site cleared it, and now it's flat, so, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's different than a wish list, and we didn't wish it would, or suggest it would be a nice addition. It was a condition of approval, so it's
Right.
binding on them. Any discussion on that? Any further discussion on the berm? Let's
No.
move on to discussion on 100 Washington. David, is there an update on that?
I wanted to confirm, I didn't have an opportunity to review the meeting minutes, but what work was believed to specifically have taken place at that property that would have required a certificate of appropriateness?
We had, in the July 7th, 2025 meeting, Mr. Parrish shared his exterior alterations he completed without the Planning Commission approval. He was discussing his property, and during the discussion, he brought up that he had done that. He had screened in a porch without approval, and he'd added lattice covering over the stucco foundation, which Mr. Dan's
Amazing.
discussion that those were architectural elements of the structure that would require Glendale, or Planning and Historic Preservation Commission approval, because they were exterior alterations more than 10% as required by code. So during that meeting, we instructed, I myself was the one, if you look at the video, Mr. Parrish to return the following month with an application for changes already completed, and to date, he has not returned. So I put down here, it's been notified, that is non-compliance to our ordinance 154.46 B1A.
We'll follow up with Mr. Parrish.
Okay. That was that.
David, I imagine if you go on Google Street View, you could see how his house looked prior to the improvements, depending on the date of the images there, of course. But that might be a good reference for you compared to what's there now. All right, anything else on the situation at 100 Washington? Last one is 55 West Sharon. Is that, Tom, was that yours as well?
Do you have the calculation?
Not for this meeting. I'll get to that in December and have some updates.
And again, that was from September 8th meeting. And basically, just to summarize, they, with the addition of the chicken coop in the rear yard, in addition to the existing garage square footage, the question was, does it meet the ordinance that the combined accessory structure building's square footage is no more than 50% of the house footprint, square footage, or 750 square feet, whichever is greater. So I was just asking about the final calculation figures.
Okay, and David, that's in process?
Yep.
All right. Any other business anyone wishes to bring before the commission before we move on to the public hearing? All right, let's move on to the public hearing. David, this is all you.
Okay, thank you. So at the, I believe it was at the October meeting of the Planning Commission, the commission moved to hold a public hearing on potential zoning code amendment regarding the historic design guidelines and new construction. I circulated a memo electronically earlier today, but also there's paper copies in front, and if anyone in the audience would like a copy, I do have some extras to go through. Prior to drafting a final version of the proposed amendments for consideration by the Planning Commission, I did want to go through a little bit of the review of the code as it exists today, as well as review a potential draft of amendments that, in my estimation, could achieve what the Planning Commission is looking to achieve. However, I do have some outstanding questions that I was hoping to get feedback from the Planning Commission on either tonight or at the January meeting. So looking quickly at the memo here, review of the existing code language. If you flip through pages 1, 2, and 3, you'll see the language as it exists in our ordinances today. I'm not going to, for the benefit of everyone, I'm not going to sit and read verbatim, but the short version of all of these notes is that as our ordinances are written today, that all exterior changes within the historic district, including landmarks and historic sites outside of the district, require a certificate of appropriateness prior to those changes being completed. So anything, and there's a list of various construction, reconstruction, addition, or demolition that require that certificate of appropriateness for all structures within the historic district or historic sites outside of the district. It goes on to explain that there are two sets of measurements, I would say, for those appropriateness reviews to take place against. The first are the design requirements, and the second are refer to them as the guidelines. Those are historic preservation guidelines, the green book that we refer to in meetings for applicants to review to ensure that their proposed project aligns with the intentions of the historic district and the intentions of the preservation of the Planning Commission.
Excuse me one second, I was daydreaming or whatever. Is all the green from the guidelines book?
No, all of the green highlighted sections on pages 1, 2, and 3, the numbers along the right-hand side, 1, 2, 3, 4, correspond with the numbers listed within the memo.
That's our zoning code. This is from our zoning.
So this is from our zoning code. These are our zoning ordinances.
The guidelines are the
This is-
landscape type of print.
Yeah, this falls underneath the historic district regulations for governing existing and new buildings.
So is green proposed and unhighlighted is existing, or what's the difference?
No, I'm using the highlighted sections to clarify and explain the detail with which this current version is written, so that when we go to a potential amendment, there will be a number of changes to, as I've written draft language, simplify this code language somewhat, because, and as I'll go on to explain, if you look at sections 3 and 4, it lists that the owner of a pivotal or contributing building, as well as a landmark site outside of the district, must use the design requirements, but also use the guidelines that are explained up in an earlier portion of this section. Then it goes on to explain that the owner of a non-contributing building within the historic district, if they intend to construct, reconstruct, or alter a building or any building, a principal or accessory building, that the requirements must be followed. But there is no mention of the guidelines being followed for those alterations. So if a non-contributing structure is altered or constructed or demolished, the guidelines by the ordinances as they're written right now do not apply to the review of that proposal. They're still required to come to Planning Commission, but the way that the language in the code is written, the review is limited to the design requirements, which are listed out through a little bit later on in these sections of the code.
I'm still not clear of the formatting of this document.
So the green, I'm using the green sections to call out that there are specific pieces of this that add, say, certain layers of complication to the amendment process.
What,
Because the code does delineate so distinctly between different types of structures and what applies to the review of each of those
I
types.
guess what I'm not clear about is the green our existing code, or is the non-highlighted our existing?
It's all our existing code. There's no
The whole
proposed
thing is
amendment.
existing.
Correct,
This is the way it exists.
correct. Pages 1, 2, and 3 have no proposed amendments.
He just highlighted those passages to draw your attention to the things he want to talk about.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you, Tom.
I'm thick, but, thank you.
So moving down to number 5 here, you'll see it talks about supplementing the design requirements by issuing guidelines. Guidelines then assure that alterations, et cetera, of landmarks, historic sites, and pivotal or contributing buildings protects and preserves the historic character of the entire district. Again, reiterating my position that as the code is written right now, the guidelines would not apply to non-contributing buildings, but based on the language from Planning Commission on the proposed amendment, new construction within the historic district on, say, a vacant lot. And then looking at 6 and 7 again, it shows that delineation of number 6, design requirements and guidelines for existing landmarks, pivotal and contributing. And then number 7, design requirements for new buildings in historic districts. So under section D, which is highlighted as number 7 on page 2, you'll see that the design, by the language of the code, the design requirements apply to new buildings, but there is no mention of the design, of the guidelines applying to those same projects.
So the existing code is consistent in that, correct?
In its current
That
state,
the
correct.
guidelines, the supplementary guidelines do not apply to new construction,
Correct.
which makes it look like it was intentional when it was passed.
And so I wish, you've set me up beautifully, Beth, thank you.
Okay.
If you go to page 4, the highlighted, this is from the guidelines book, this is page 19 of the guidelines book. Highlighted section, section 8. My interpretation, and of course I'm happy to discuss this with the Planning Commission, is that this section is written and beginning with the highlighting together these requirements and guidelines, so they see them as two separate, my interpretation sees them as two separate sets of requirements.
They are.
Or, well,
Yes,
language,
they
two separate sets of language. And then the explanation that they preserve the historic character, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And it mentions new buildings.
It does mention new buildings, but there is no code language that
Yeah.
backs that. So
Okay.
to your comment, Beth, I do agree. It looks like the guidelines were written
Yeah.
as something to apply to historic
Get the alternate
structures
later?
all the way down to contributing structures.
But there is a section in the guidelines that has to do with new construction, isn't there?
There are sections within the guidelines that do align with new construction. The issue, of course, becomes that the code itself doesn't offer an avenue.
Right.
It's a
Right.
fun, legal, technical kind of
Okay.
middle ground, so.
Yep.
And then, moving to page 7, this What's here in black is the existing code, and then red, using word track changes, is showing potential amendments. So my question or request of the Planning Commission would be to review these potential changes to see that it does achieve what is intended here for the guidelines to apply to all construction in the historic district or all reconstruction, alteration, et cetera.
Just real quick, that very first one, the owner of a lot, it'd be comma, right?
Yeah, it just needs a comma.
Yeah, it just needs,
Comma in there. All right.
so then leaving the minimum required at exceeding 150 square feet, that is the existing requirement. Moving through to the bottom of page 7, you'll see where reads, when the owner of a building or lot inside of a historic district or landmark or historic site outside of a, should read historic, not history. My autocorrect got me on that one. Intends to construct, reconstruct, or alter or demolish, and then provides a listing, any building exceeding 150 square feet, and then the existing requirements, architectural features of those buildings or accessory buildings with those same requirements. So right now, this is broken up based on the type of structure within the inventory. So it's a landmark, pivotal, contributing, non-contributing is the final. That's section C that is struck here. So that would be removed in favor of the beginning section, because the beginning section covers all potential construction or alterations within the historic district that the guidelines would apply to.
And this first paragraph up there, it's always been it's like, why is this in here? The preservation guidelines approved by the village on 04, along with subsequent revisions, shall be a guide to GHP or GPHPC in its determination of appropriateness. But it doesn't have any teeth to it. I mean, when I read it back in the court, there was a court case about that we thought that these should be used as a guide, and that because it's referenced there, it held water as far as being codified in the ordinance, but in reality, it's not.
That section B, if you flip back to the bottom of page 7, stipulates that that section applies to pivotal buildings or contributing buildings or landmarks outside of the district. So while it is an avenue, or it is a mechanism for planning commission for those structures and those projects, it's, my interpretation is that the limitation is there, that it lists what it applies to and nothing further at that point.
If you recall, though, I thought when the Glendale went to court, and you'll have to look this up and let me know if I heard this right, confirm it, the Navarro subdivision of the lot into 3 lots, and we were using the guidelines as a rationale for you cannot build a house on those lots as subdivided, proposed subdivision, based on the guidelines, which are shown here as we shall look at those, a guide. But as the way I understand it, when it went to court, that we lost on that those held no water because they're not actually codified ordinances. Is that, if you would check that and make sure that's true, that my memory is correct.
So the
Is
last,
that before your time?
it is, the last
Do you recall
amendment.
that?
Yeah, I do. Well, I think the answer is that there's a note at the top of all the pages that it's pending review by the village solicitor. So I think that we could put that on her plate.
So, okay, so in that's always bothered me, because it's like, anytime you say shall be, that's a legal term that it shall be done. And yet it's unenforceable. So that needs to be looked at and clarified, either removed completely or codify the guidelines.
Yes.
So the guidelines were properly codified when the amendment for the 1.5 and 2.5 story change, when that amendment went into effect, when that was passed by council, the language of that ordinance was written to properly codify all of the guidelines. Now, that was, of course, it was back in September or August of this year, whenever council had that on their agenda, was in 2025. So at that point, the guidelines were properly codified. Now, I would refer back to how applicable that little section might be across.
Where is that? Do you have that specific?
September of
ordinance?
2025.
Yeah, it was September of 2025. I don't have the ordinance
Good.
in this packet, but
Because that would be huge, and then
Yes.
this would hold,
it's still, in my understanding and interpretation, it is still because that section in which it says shall be a guide is limited to those specific historic categories of structures. So pivotal, landmark, or landmark pivotal, and then contributing. Because if you refer down to section C on page 8, the owner of a non-contributing building within a historic district, that section explains that, and the whole section explains, a certificate of appropriateness is still required, so planning commission still has the authority to review it. However, the way this is written is that it reads, GPHPC shall follow the design requirements for non-contributing buildings in section F, division F of this section, and design requirements for site improvements and demolition. So the guidelines aren't referred to when you're dealing with non-contributing structures, which obviously a new construction home would be.
just so I'm clear, I am all for the guidelines being codified, that we can use those as reference and shall use those. I'm all for that. It's just the language doesn't seem clear enough to me to,
Well, and-
when we get in the middle of these discussions, or in that
And that's
court
the-
case I referred to.
That's the purpose of this amendment, is to make sure that if the guidelines are intended to be documentation for all projects in the historic district, then the language should reflect that those guidelines are for all projects, all potential projects in the district.
Okay.
So moving forward, the next piece and where,
Hey, David, real quick, I want to stay on that last point. If you wouldn't mind asking our solicitor if we can actually make the guidelines like the requirements, codify them and make them mandatory as opposed to suggestions.
A guide.
All right.
I believe the language of the guidelines does have a fair amount of fluidity to them, so I don't know about making them firmly required in a certain sense.
That's what we're talking about, codifying, making them a requirement, just like the
Well-
design requirements.
What this as I interpret this proposed amendment is that the guidelines remain, and the phrase shall be a guide to the GPHPC appears a few times in this code section. My understanding of the proposed amendment would be that the planning commission would then use the guidelines as that, a guide for their review, and things like window type or, simulated divided light or whatever, that there might be certain circumstances where there may be deviation from the guidelines. However, because they're being used as a guide rather than as codified ordinance and as like legally required language or legally required,
Well, that's my point.
Conditions.
What we're talking about is suggesting making them requirements. And I asked you to ask the solicitor if we can make the guidelines requirements. I mean, as long as I've been here, the guidelines have been suggestions, for lack of a better term. And that's how the wording is written. They shall be a guide. The word shall is problematic, but the guide is what's guiding. But if you can ask the solicitor in her review, if we can in fact make the guidelines, give them more teeth, is really what it amounts to.
I'll certainly ask the solicitor. I would refer back on page 4 of 12 to page 19, this last paragraph in the left-hand column. The guidelines book reads, unlike the design requirements, the design guidelines outlined and illustrated in this handbook are not rigid rules, but suggestions of appropriate ways to construct new buildings, make changes, and demolish. So,
Which to me makes them worthless.
it does and it doesn't. I think I'll tell you, from my perspective, to give someone a book and say, you're planning this project, here's a pile of resource on architectural styles, what's appropriate and all that, it's very helpful,
And that-
especially for people who are novices at these kinds of projects.
And I think that was the original intent of the guidelines, was to help
It's my understanding as well.
people before they came to us have an idea of where they should be thinking, or what they should be thinking,
And then
what was appropriate.
contrasting that with the design requirements, which are most recently the proposed new home construction in the historic district, the design requirement was that it could not exceed the footprint of an adjacent landmark structure. And that's a mathematical calculation. That's a very clear, straightforward, objective measurement of compliance or non-compliance. So going back to the proposed code language amendments, so looking back on page 9 of 12, where my interest is in discussion with the Planning Commission now and then into the January meeting is we have several sets of design requirements. Setting the guidelines aside for a moment, there are several sets of design requirements based on the type of structure from a historical category perspective. So C, and they're highlighted here in yellow, C applies to existing landmarks, pivotal or contributing buildings. And then D applies to new buildings. And then E is, E, and then even to a certain extent F, but E is specifically, applies to site improvements and is limited to signage and parking and paving. So my question to the commission would be, obviously, there are some, like materials, is the language is consistent between the two sections, but for instance, C1A, alterations of an exterior design, and then alterations of exterior design with an addition, those sorts of details, I think, should be something that the Planning Commission has input on what exact language those guys should make up those requirements, so that when we do amend this section of code, we're able to very cleanly define the difference between what is a requirement and what is part of the guidelines.
So on page 9, 10, and 11, are those, or any, is any of this text already in our code?
This is our code, existing
This is,
code.
this is all within the code.
So the yellow is just separating out,
Just to call attention
block.
to those sections.
Okay.
correct. Yep.
so none of the verbiage below that is changed.
Correct, but if we do transition to a scenario where the code requires, has design requirements and guidelines for all structures, it would, in my opinion, is important to cleanly define what those requirements
Split it out.
would be, unless there is interest in keeping these separate sets of requirements based on historical importance.
Yeah.
And then either modifying or adopting a new section that would apply specifically to new construction. But also too worth mentioning is we're talking about, new construction would blur the line between, a porch addition would blur the line between if you're building it on an existing contributing building, that's new construction, which set of guidelines would you use, or which set of requirements would you use? So too for new buildings like accessory buildings
Yeah.
in historic districts. So I think there's some reconstruction or streamlining, to use a word, of this section of code, specifically starting with C and going forward, on how the Planning Commission would recommend to council that this code section be updated to reflect potential new requirements or preferred language, preferred requirements for these changes. Does that make some sense?
I'm just looking down through here, somewhere in the ordinance, and I don't have the ordinance in front of me right now, somewhere there's something that refers, I talked about hardscape, like retaining walls, that sort of thing, landscapes, major landscaping. Somewhere in our ordinance, we refer to that in the historic district, landscaping, and it'd probably be more appropriate to stick it under this new E, site improvements to properties in the historic district, wherever it it appears now, to bring it in so that, if somebody's building a giant stone retaining wall or other site improvements, sidewalks, the other things I mentioned earlier. Like I said, I know it appears somewhere in there. I'm just gonna-
I know what section
Okay.
you're talking about. I don't know exactly
It
where it
may
is.
be
but
good to bring it into this section.
I know where it exists, or I know that it exists.
I'd like to know, were there specific problems or cases with new construction or non-contributing buildings that made you take a look at the code?
So, from my perspective, a planning commission voted to initiate this process.
Oh,
So the ask of going through this process came from the planning commission. In my interpretation, obviously, the historic district is necessary to preserve, right? And the guidelines help with that by giving some guidance on what is appropriate, what is inappropriate. For the purposes of reviewing specifically new single-family homes or any kind of new main building, the design requirements language, the way that it's written, talking about specific measurements and specific, you have to measure scale versus the existing building next door and the proposed, those sorts of things. Those are more objective and, in my opinion, are a lot easier to measure and a lot easier to evaluate against, whereas one person's architectural vision or interpretation might vary from another, and you get into some potential for, well, the guidelines say this, but I think that means, you understand what I'm saying? You go away from the objective and you go into the subjective a little bit. So my recommendation, I think, going through this process would be that those sort of mathematical calculations, those objective evaluations, don't get lost in favor of pure guideline review or guideline opinion. But largely, we don't have a lot of new main building construction in the historic district. And for those that are, I think there is a potential of walking that line between, if you're using the guidelines as the reviewing document, you're going to build something that might get a little bit too close to mimicking existing historic architecture rather than complementing existing historic architecture, which is, of course, that's a whole can of worms on its own. So wherever that line is drawn is going to take some consideration of how applicable do we want the guidelines to end up being to new construction, and kind of as a carryover from that, what is new construction? That's a fun question to ask. But are we talking about new structures, standalone structures? Are we talking about porch additions, garages? Are we talking about, every time somebody puts anything out that isn't, versus new structures that are exceeding that 150 square foot?
okay. Thank you. Well, may I comment?
Absolutely, that's what's for your.
The status of the guidelines has always been rather murky, and to have requirements and guidelines is confusing, I think. And at the time when the guidelines were prepared, they're just, I think there was recognition that the design requirements in our ordinance are very limited, but there wasn't a political will to adding a lot of additional requirements.
Right.
So it was, well, okay, so it would be nice if we would follow these guidelines. But my experience in the last 20 years is that we usually don't consider them or follow them very closely. I'm talking about the guidelines. If we do codify them, they need to be rewritten. And we would have to get rid of the Green Book and redo it. This is a major undertaking, what is being suggested now.
Right.
to review the code and the requirements and the guidelines and make it all work together. So is there the political will to beef up our design requirements in the zoning code? That's a fundamental question.
Just off the top of my head, if you went through the guidelines and just went straight down through the guidelines and pulled out significant pieces that we could transfer over to the codified ordinance requirements and still leave the guideline book as a neighborly, or get rid of it altogether.
Well,
what you're
to codify or not to codify,
So-
that is the question.
To answer your question, Beth, it is codified as a book of, we'll just say polite suggestions,
Exactly. Now, I'm
And-
talking about
and-
putting it in the code as,
which,
Requirements.
right, is, I don't understand this amendment process as the route to achieve that. Rather, to say that right now, you have an existing, let's say, contributing structure, you want to make an amendment or an adjustment to it, or a change to it, you have to follow the design requirements, but then also the planning commission reviews your application based on the guidelines, which, to your point, may or may not actually happen with regularity, but is still part of that process. The flip side of that is, if there is new construction in the historic district, then that doesn't meet any of those kinds of historical categories, then the guidelines don't, the way the code is written, the guidelines don't apply, but the design requirements apply.
right.
And I think my understanding would be that the design guidelines would have the same weight for historic structures or for new structures as they do for historic structures. So there wouldn't be maybe any change to the adherence or the strict adherence to the guidelines, but rather adding that tool for planning commission's review of new construction to non-pivotal, non-landmark, non-historic structures. Does that
Well,
distinction make sense?
the review of new construction is critically important, as we saw on West Fountain not long ago, and we probably will have another application for that lot. So I think it's worth taking a look at what are we asking applicants to do. It is appropriate for non-contributing buildings to be treated differently than pivotal or contributing buildings. And typically, you're just supposed to either respect the character of the non-contributing building or make it more compatible with the district. And I would need to look at that, but I don't think non-contributing building, the treatment of non-contributing buildings is very complicated. Certainly not as complicated as looking at how do we review new construction.
Beth, I agree with you that codifying the guidelines would be a heavy lift and it requires a lot of political will, and community may not have the stomach for that. I'm not predicting that, I'm just saying that's a lot of work.
Yep.
In my experience, the guidelines, she just left, a perfect example is the garage that Megan Holst just presented today with us. Everything was totally appropriate, the skirting and the siding and so forth. There was a question about the windows, and
Yeah.
it didn't necessarily match the guidelines, but everything else did. And I think, no doubt, she was very well aware of the guidelines and used them in the design of her building. So I think they're working at some level. They don't carry the weight that we wish they would. And perhaps there's a middle ground somewhere, David, where the language of the code strengthens the way we use the guidelines. Instead of just making a mere suggestion, it allows us to give them greater weight. Because at the end of the day, the certificates of appropriateness are based upon our discretion, based on the guidelines and the review of the criteria, or the requirements. So if somehow the solicitor can suggest a way that we give the guidelines greater weight, that might just be a happy middle ground.
Okay.
Well, with the example of the vinyl windows, the guidelines say, do not, I mean, they're very clear.
I know,
Do
yeah.
not use 100%
Yeah.
vinyl windows,
Yeah.
which is why, I mean, I was surprised that she had vinyl windows in her house, frankly.
I don't remember when
But-
that came, but,
But,
yeah.
but that's why I was careful to be specific in the motion to say why we approved it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's not in the ordinance, it's not in an ordinance. It's just
In the guidelines.
And that may be why we approved it when they did the renovation on that house, their house. Because the only requirement that applied at the time, that I recall, is that it would be of materials that are wood or simulate wood. You know, simulate wood can be anything. Yeah, so, anyway, I think that's how it went through.
Okay.
Well, and I don't think there was 100% agreement among members of the planning commission as to how we looked at vinyl windows.
Agreed. I agreed that we disagree.
And that
disagree.
some,
we did disagree,
and they have improved somewhat.
Yeah.
So they're not all created equal, you know, there are some that are
Right.
better than others.
Right. And the industry changes too, from
Yeah.
year to year, decade to decade. All right. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address this public hearing? David, I think logistically, we closed the public hearing sort of in progress because we're still gathering information.
Yeah, I think,
And then we'll reopen it January, maybe February, whenever we know everybody's going to be here. Especially if it gives you an opportunity to talk to the solicitor about certain changes. And then we'll just,
So will we address this in terms of the January, you know, the annual review of the code?
yeah, it's a perfect
Yeah.
example of what we do on an annual basis, reviewing the code and the guidelines. We're doing both in a sense here, so. I think we satisfied that obligation, but we'll certainly make it a part of the agenda. Dave, if you wouldn't mind keeping this on the agenda for January, if nothing else, to
Absolutely.
let us know the status.
absolutely.
All right. Any other business fit to come before the planning commission?
Do we need to move the closure of the
Yeah,
public
let's do
hearing?
that. Move to
Okay,
close.
so moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to close the public hearing. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are no longer going to hear from anyone on that particular item. Is there any other business that needs to come before the commission?
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.